All right, so let's get into our next speaker. I was really fortunate at a recent meetup to run into our next speaker and had a quick little chat with him. It was a busy night, and so I thought this is really fortuitous, and we got yakking about what's happening in this space. And little did I know that I was, I'm going to blow smoke here, but I was in the presence of somebody, pretty heavy. And Leo Weese, he is the technical content lead, get that title correct, for Lightning Labs. And if you've been following the space, you know that, that's one of the top three, is it not? And correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's only three, and anyways, we'll save that for another time. These guys are a big deal. They are making incredible strides in the space, and Leo tonight is going to talk about that. We'll wait till the siren goes by before we bring him up. But also, Leo is, what did we say? A long-time Hong Kong Bitcoiner. So Pacific Rim associate now here in Vancouver, right on. So he's probably got lots to add, and think about some questions after this, because we're going to have some good time. So you can bring up some questions to Leo. But meanwhile, why don't we get you going, and you're going to talk about the commercial aspect, and so I won't steal any of it, but this is how you spend Bitcoin and in Lightning. So right on. Welcome, Leo Weese.
Cool. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for emceeing on short notice. Always quite happy to have fresh voices, fresh opinions. Great to hear your story. If any of you maybe you weren't just prepared just now when Father Hodl, the Reverend, asked you to speak out, but we very much appreciate a variety of opinions and voices up here. So if you do have something to say, even if it's related to my talk or related to BitDevs, then please just contact us or spontaneously speak up. Who here has bought something in a store with Bitcoin? So not online, but in a store. Okay, that's quite a few of us. I do enjoy spending Bitcoin, mainly because every transaction feels like you're liberating yourself. Every transaction feels like, it almost feels a bit like losing shackles. That's quite the opposite feeling I get from using a credit card, or even my second preferred payment method, cash. There's something very unique about a peer-to-peer electronic payment that costs pretty much no fees. It's done instantly and cannot really be censored or surveyed by anybody. But what I want to talk about is how do we actually find these places? How do we learn where can we spend our sats? We're still a little bit in that stage where it is rare to find a shop that accepts Bitcoin. It is rare to make a Bitcoin transaction even in person, even if you are getting paid in Bitcoin, even if you are living your entire life on Bitcoin. Then by number of transactions, especially by number of transactions that you're doing in person, it's probably going to be mainly card or mainly cash. So how do we find out about shops that accept cash or shops that accept card, right? Usually we just assume they do. We just go around, we know, either we know where we're going, or we know what we want, or we're just wandering the streets, and unless there's a big sign at the entrance that says we don't accept cash or we don't accept card, then we kind of assume they accept both and everything. But it hasn't always been like this, right? How did the early credit card companies get their members? The first credit cards were usually members clubs. Either they evolved from things like department stores. They would have their frequent buyers kind of grouped together to a members club and said, if you're a frequent buyer, if you regularly come to this department store to buy, we're just going to let you pay later, right? And then you had a little membership card that just allowed you to, write it up. Diners Club, they were a membership club for certain restaurants, and so for these kind of systems, it was a relatively small group of people. It was relatively, also a rare thing to do. But they used these membership groups as distribution channels. And of course, in the Bitcoin community, we do something similarly here. We are a bit of a members club, even though the doors are open, even though anybody can join. But we do promote businesses that accept Bitcoin. We might hold events at places that accept Bitcoin, or we might point out that certain, that you can buy something with Bitcoin. We might have partners like Bull Bitcoin that do point out where can you spend your Bitcoin, what can you actually do with it. But if we want to really scale this, then it has to go beyond word of mouth. And if we want to scale this, then we also want to scale it in a way that's like really properly done, that like adheres to our values, that adheres to the principles of an open network and open source and permissionless innovation, because we don't really want to compromise on these values, even when it comes to something like a merchant directory. So there are existing, what are the existing merchant directories like outside of Bitcoin? Like the most popular ones are probably Yelp, they're probably Google Maps. That's how people find where to go or what to do, or that's maybe even how people nowadays find like Google Maps, like an ATM nearby. And these kind of directories could theoretically also enable Bitcoin payments. They could have a field in Yelp, right, where you as a business, Yelp sends out an email to all the restaurants and asks them, do you accept Bitcoin or not? And you can, the merchant owner or whoever maintains the listing can just say yes or no, and that gets added to the database. And then you, as a user, you can go to Yelp.com and just say, show me all the restaurants that serve
filter,
as a filter, And I think Yelp had that actually at some point. It just didn't really catch on. We had a bit of a side story, like Bitcoin. There were probably more merchants accepting Bitcoin in 2014 than there are now, and often that's a bit to how Bitcoin developed, right? And we know that a lot of people are still a bit upset about how that happened, but that's the one way forward. And so here we are with a new payment network that's actually now made for payments, the Lightning Network, that is actually like functions relatively well for how to do these quick, instantaneous final settlement payments that also have a good user experience. But we kind of have to go again from scratch on evangelizing businesses and getting people signed up with wallets, and even payment processors like BitPay, right? They have to invest quite a bit of effort to like enable these new payment networks. So what I'm leading onto is I'll move over to this kind of the introductory presentation, right? Is that if we want this to adhere to our values and adhere to our principles, then why don't we use something like OpenStreetMaps as a source of truth, as a directory? Because it already exists, it already has traction. It actually is also, it is also kind of bound by the same dilemmas that general open source software is. With Wikipedia, we have like a collaborative, open encyclopedia that really has kind of like replaced all encyclopedias. With OpenStreetMaps, no, we're not quite there yet. OpenStreetMaps is an open source, wiki-style source for maps. And so it relies somewhat on volunteers, depending on which country you're in. You might also have like governments kind of like publishing their official map data in data that is compatible with OpenStreetMaps. You might also have private entities kind of maintaining this for them. You might have enthusiasts. If you look at a map like Japan, you're going to immediately notice that Japan is absolutely lush with rail enthusiasts, because the level of detail on their railway systems on the OpenStreetMaps is just like outstripping all imagination. In other places, it's not so developed. Often, I think it's really fascinating how kind of Google and Apple have kind of their own proprietary maps that are incredibly well developed, especially when it comes to merchant data, especially when it comes to things like traffic or public transit. But because of the inability to compete with Google and Apple now, the one way to break this duopoly for a lot of companies like Bing or like Facebook is actually not to build their own map competitors, but rather to contribute to something like OpenStreetMaps. And so using OpenStreetMaps as a way for Bitcoiners to record which places accept Bitcoin is not exactly a new idea either. In 2000, that was roughly 2013, that CoinMap, which was later, I don't know if it was formally acquired by Trezor or if it was always like a Trezor side project, but it began also by providing an easy editor or providing easy interface for OpenStreet data. On OpenStreetMaps, you can see that a little bit here. You have anything that exists is either like a map or a line, right? A border is a bit of a line, a street is a line, and then there are points. Everything is either a line or a point. And so now we can create points and we can associate these points with tags so that when you have map software that is interpret these tags in a meaningful way. Is this point now a bench? Is this point now a store? Or is this point now a bus stop? And things like this. So we use these kind of tags, and these are the tags that we now use to have either existing places or new places to signal to the world that they take Bitcoin. And this is something that is actually relatively easy to do. This is something that you don't need programming knowledge for, and this is something that I can encourage you all to look up at some point. You can go to openstreetmaps.org. You can generate an account. Theoretically, it's also still possible to edit anonymously, and to just look at the map of how it looks around you. You can add features if you believe, for example, that this park bench that exists is not on the map. You can add it. You can go into incredibly small details, such as where's a fire hydrant. Personally, I found it useful in the past to be like on a large parking lot and know exactly where the pay machine is, right? Because you can record that kind of information on the map. And so now you can add features. You can say the place downstairs for me is not recorded on the map. I would like to record it, and actually I've orange pilled them. So I'm going to add these tags that will allow then a service that will pretty much allow anybody to pick up this information and like as a filter. So what kind of the Open Maps community agreed to is currency XBT equals yes. They like to use the ISO, that XBT is kind of the official compliant way of saying BTC, because when they set up the standard for how to name currencies, they said currencies need to have all 3-digit codes, and government currencies get to use the full spectrum, and private currencies have to start with an X. Somebody at some point came up with that, and so there's a bit of a BitMEX, for example, also prefers to use XBT over BTC. If you have any kind of large established exchange that needs to comply with these codes, especially like what is a good example, like ICE, right, Intercontinental Exchange. They also have Bitcoin futures now. They would also use XBT. So this kind of tag now signals to the world, here's a place that accepts Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is just a currency, right? And Bitcoin, so now you accept Bitcoin payments, but how do you actually pay? And so we use different tags for these. The most popular ones are on-chain, and you say yes, no, do you accept it, right? If it's, you can also leave it out, and instead of a no, it's just a bit of a, it removes a bit of ambiguity rather than saying, I do not know if they accept on-chain payments, rather than I know they don't. Lightning equals yes. Lightning contactless is kind of the NFC one. And relatively useless to have, to keep, when it comes to maintaining data, is when did you upload this? I think this also opens up a couple of interesting questions of like how exactly is our Bitcoin payment experience going to develop in the future, especially once you have wallets such as Cash App in the US, right? With Cash App in the US, theoretically, you can pay any kind of Lightning invoice without having Bitcoin. So now you can also do the opposite. You can receive through the Lightning Network without really having Bitcoin. Simply, Strike is another good example of of an app that you just connect to your bank account, but now you can pay any Lightning invoice that you presented, and the money is just being kind of credited from, kind of debited from your bank account. So maybe in the future, a lot of people will use Lightning that way, or maybe a business that wants to, maybe a business does not want to accept Bitcoin because they don't know what it is, they don't care about it, but they have a payment processor that happens to also handle Lightning invoices. Maybe in the future we have these kind of situations where you have a user that uses Cash App and doesn't really know what Bitcoin is. All they know is that if there's a Lightning symbol at the door, they can use their Cash App to pay. And a business that says, we want Canadian dollars in our bank account, but we know that we can put up this Lightning symbol to signal to people that will pay. So I think the system is relatively like future-proof, and even if Bitcoin like develops into like slightly different directions, it's also so there's one. So now we have this pure data, right? So now we're at the stage where we have gone around. We've tagged all the businesses, every place that we know that accepts Bitcoin. We've kind of like added this information, but it's still just a database. It's still just like raw data. So now how do we turn this into something that's like useful, something that actually helps us discover places? And because it is an open database, because it is open source, it is relatively easy to build up on top of it. You can clone this database. You can clone this database either just locally or globally, depending on how much storage and bandwidth you have. You can run queries on top of it. You can, for example, only show places that accept Lightning, or you can only show places that accept NFC, or you can only show places that accept Lightning and have been surveyed within the last year, and things like this. And so there's one company that I'd like to highlight. I think it works if I don't have to click on it. It's called CoinMap is the old one. The new one is called BTCmap.org. So BTC Map, and they have a little. And they built a. If I scroll to the very bottom, and so I want to scroll to the very bottom. And so they built a relatively simple interface that just takes the OpenStreetMap data, but also gets only a list of places that have tagged with accepting Bitcoin, and then displays them wherever they are. And they do this in a way that makes it relatively easy to include this into any existing site with an iframe. And I think that already is like quite a solid framework for now having something that's open source, something that's easily, you can run this yourself too. You can change the parameters. You can say, I'm not, so a lot of these places are places that buy and sell Bitcoin, right? They're kind of brokers. There's also a broker here, Bitcoin Vancouver. There's a broker here in West Vancouver. You could say, I only want to show Bitcoin ATMs on this page. Or you could say, I only want to show restaurants. Or I only want to show like convenience stores and things like this. So this is also something that you could build into an existing app. This is something that you can also like build more like feed data to. For example, there are still quite popularly used proprietary maps, especially for ATMs. If you go to coinatmradar.com, then they have a very well-maintained list of ATMs, and they are able to do so because the ATM operators have a strong incentive to upload their own places to a public directory, including information such as Can you buy Bitcoin? Can you sell Bitcoin? Can you buy and sell other currencies? On-chain, off-chain? Is it open 24/7? And some things like this. So I would like to see all this data being kind of replicated in an open source way, and so that we have like, we don't need to have like a consensus-like system, but we should have a well-maintained database that helps us discover Bitcoin places. And I would even go so far as saying, I hope that not only does the amount of merchants on this map grow and the amount of users on this map grow, but that the kind of this format of recording data and recording shops and recording our surroundings kind of supersedes the proprietary and private alternatives of Google and Apple Maps. And with the only thing I want to add is I think I've pointed out a little bit, but this is really something that you don't need any coding experience for. This is a very cool thing to get started with, contributing to open source development, to contributing to the Bitcoin economy, to contributing to a sovereign economy, by simply, if you know a shop that accepts Bitcoin, find out, is it on this list, make sure all the information is up to date. If you're running a business and you don't accept Bitcoin, then you can start accepting Bitcoin, but even if you don't, you can still add yourself to the list, maintain your data. If you can look at that map and just see what's around you. If maybe you do find a cool shop that accepts Bitcoin that you want to try out, maybe as of today, more likely you will find a few cool shops that used to accept Bitcoin. Maybe time to remind them to implement it again or remove them from the map. It's going to make life a lot easier for people who spend Bitcoin, for businesses that accept Bitcoin. And with these words, I'd like to transition into Open BitDevs. I think.
Hey Leo, it's Fussler. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, just a quick question. Does that also have like ATMs that are around town as well on that map, or is it just more businesses?
Theoretically, it should have anything that is like physically has a physical representation. So it also should have ATMs. There are specific tags for ATMs. So that they show up slightly differently, but they should definitely be on there. And then ideally, the BTC map that I just showed has a bit of a filtering way so that you can say, I only want to see ATMs right now because I really need to buy some Bitcoin with cash. Or you should be able to easily filter, oh, I only want to see bars because I would like to have a beer. But the tags are all there. Everything that has a physical presence should ideally be there. So then the one problem that's then left solving is, how do we find online businesses that accept Bitcoin? But actually, that's a bit more harder problem, and that's a problem that we also really haven't solved for in like the non-Bitcoin world. Johnny had a question.
If you want to contribute to the data, do you have to go through btcmap.org or the OpenStreetMaps?
No, btcmap.org just displays the data. The data exists on OpenStreetMap.org, and ideally that's where it's being added and edited. You can submit a business through a simple web form on btcmap.org. There's a simple web form there, so if you want to add a business, you want to have like the least amount of effort, and you can just fill out the web form and they will add the business for you. But if you want to add the raw data, which is important if you want to change details about a business, or if you want to remove a business, or if you want to add information to an existing business, then you have to add the raw map. But no programming experience necessary whatsoever.
It's not like Google Business where you claim a business address, it's just anybody can.
Yeah. So theoretically, there is a bit of a moderation process. So if OpenStreetMaps could become super popular, then there might be a moderation process, for example, where people ask for like sources. Theoretically, there's a way to like add a source. I don't expect too much controversy around whether a shop exists or not. You know, that is much easier to find out than maybe the OpenStreetMaps controversies exist. They're mainly around things like national borders. You can imagine like national lists of various like conflict areas with like borders to be redrawn. There isn't so much yeah, controversy over whether a shop or not exists, or whether a shop accepts a certain kind of payment method.
Yeah. So if you're a local to somewhere, maybe you don't have a storefront or an office or something, and you are accepting Bitcoin in your area for services.
Yeah.
Can you add yourself that way? Or?
Yeah, so it is supposed to be like a localized thing. So there's of course a gray area, right?
Yeah,
there's a gray area where you might be, you might be a local handyman, but you don't really have an office, right? And so I think it's easier to add yourself than to not add yourself, right?
So like use your home address maybe, or somewhere.
Yeah, or the address where you would typically perform like your work, right? That gray area exists because businesses don't all fall into the easy category of I have a storefront. There's also, I mean, of course, if a business now runs purely online but has a headquarters, like of course that is still a valid point, even though you can't actually walk into that store and buy something. But I mean, OpenStreetMap wants to just capture the reality of what's happening on the ground. So of course, a online business that has a physical presence somewhere would still be on there somewhere. Maybe there's so these discussions also exist on how that should be tagged. There could, for example, the system is relatively easily extendable, so it should be possible to say, I have a business, I accept Bitcoin, my headquarters are here, but I don't have like an open door. I don't have a counter. Right?
Yeah.
Do they verify? If so, and how do they verify?
At the moment, there's pretty much no verification. If there were disputes, there could be a moderation process similar to like Wikipedia, where then somebody says, you want to make that edit, please back it up with a source. So you will now want to say, this place no longer accepts Bitcoin, I want to remove it, and my sources, I went there last week. Or this place now does accept Bitcoin, my sources, their tweet announcing it. Do you have another question?
And just, so you said there's not really anywhere like this for online only stores?
So there is actually, I mean, we can talk about it. There's a place called, is it called lightningstores.com? There's an online directory of places that accept Lightning payments, and you can upvote and downvote them by how good your experience was, or whether you just like the kind of products. And that's definitely a way to explore businesses. Maybe that could also need a couple of tags. So maybe you should be able to say ships to BC or ships to Canada, or online business like with shipping or without shipping. Because of course there's casinos on there too. So then it's not so much about whether they ship to here, but just about whether they're available.